Welcome back to the Houghton Lake Public Library's series on using Windows 10. Today, we'll be taking a look at some commonly used settings. In order to access your settings on Windows 10, you'll want to click on the Start menu in the bottom left corner of your screen. From there, you'll want to go ahead and click on the gear, and if you hover your mouse over it, it'll actually pop this out and say Settings. So again, that is Start menu, and then to the gear. From here, you'll see we have different categories of settings. We'll start by taking a look at the System settings up here in the top left. Whenever you're looking at settings in Windows 10, be aware that after you click on a category of settings, you'll then have a bunch of subcategories down here on the left. The first section, and you can see this little blue bar here highlights it, and this means it's the active section, is the display settings. One setting you may want to look at inside of display is the night light setting. If you left click that, you can turn it on. And what it will do is, by default, at certain times, usually late at night, it'll actually change the color of your screen to a more reddish hue, and that's designed to help reduce eye strain and actually help you sleep better. It's a setting I actually use personally, and you can test it if you'd like to see if it will help you out at all. One other setting you may be interested in the display section here is the scale and layout. You'll see right now it's at 100%, but if you find that perhaps you have trouble reading some text because it's too small, you can try using this option, dropping it down and selecting something a little bigger. You'll see it change the scale of everything, and now all the text is a little bigger. And I'm going to change it back to 100. If we continue down our subcategories here, you'll see the next one is sound. So let's go ahead and look at the options for sound. And again, you'll see the little blue bar has moved down to indicate this is now the active subsection we're looking at. The most important thing you'll find inside sound is the master volume. You can see here it's set to 100%, but if you find that your sound is too high or too low, you can drag this little bar around and increase or decrease your volume. You can also find the same option down here in the bottom right in the system tray with this little speaker icon. And that'll also allow you to do the same thing. As you can see, it's moving both sliders because it's the same setting. One other section inside of the system settings that you might be interested in is the power and sleep right here. Power and sleep gives you options to have the screen or the computer go to sleep after you're idle for a certain amount of time. So you can see here, when the computer is plugged in, the screen will turn off after an hour. And when the computer is plugged in, the PC will go to sleep after an hour of being idle. If you're looking at this on a laptop, you'll also have a drop-down box that gives you options for when the computer is running on battery and when the computer is running on battery for sleep. So usually you'll have slightly longer times set for plugged in and slightly shorter times set for on battery, because it helps to save your battery life if, say, you have the screen turn off after 10 minutes while idle when you're on battery. So that way you're using your battery less. So these are all the settings I wanted to look at inside of System. So we'll use this back arrow up at the top left to get us back to the main area, or we can click the Home button here to get us back to the main area of settings. So let's go ahead and click Home. The next section we're going to look at is right here, Devices. The first section is Bluetooth and other devices. So this is the area you'd want to go to if you ever needed to pair a Bluetooth device. Now it's important to note your computer may or may not have a Bluetooth option. If it's a laptop, it probably does. If it's a desktop, you might need to buy a dongle. But if you needed to ever pair a device, this is the section you'd go to right here to add a Bluetooth device. Another section you might be interested in is the printers and scanners. And this, again, would be a section where you could add a printer to your computer, or if you've already had one installed, and Windows is generally pretty good about automatically installing most printers nowadays, you could find the printer, click on it, and then you can go to Manage and get some options for your printer. So for example, under Printing Preferences, it'll bring up the drivers for your printer, and you can control things like two-sided printing or color. And again, we can use this back button or this home button to get back to where we want to go. I'm going to go back because we still have one more section I want to look at. So the next section I want to look at is mouse. A couple things you might be interested in inside the mouse settings are the cursor speed. So if we drag this to the right, this will increase our cursor speed. So it'll move around a lot more quickly with less movement of the mouse. Or you may be interested in decreasing it. And now it'll take a lot bigger movements of the mouse to move the cursor around. So if you feel like the cursor goes too fast by default, you can slow it down a little bit by dragging this to the left or right. One other thing you may be interested in doing with your mouse, and you may notice it you may have noticed that I do it for these videos, is if we go over here to the right, there's this section called Adjust Mouse and Cursor Size. And if you find that your mouse pointer is just a little too small, you lose track of it sometimes while you're using the computer, you can use this slider right here to control the size of your mouse. Now by default, it's usually about this size right here. But by dragging it over to the right, we make it a lot larger. And you can also use these options right here to change the color of the pointer. And for all of my videos, I make it large and yellow, so it's easy for you to see and follow during the video. So let's go back to the home section. And we're going to skip over now to personalization. I know a lot of people like to set custom backgrounds on their Windows machine, so this is where you'd go for that. You can see there's some pictures you can just choose by default that they give you with Windows, or you can go to Browse, and if you had your own pictures you wanted to send, you could go ahead and use one of those, and it'll change your background to that picture instead. And we're going to go back to the home setting. And now we're going to jump into apps. Now this apps section is important because this is where you would go to remove most apps. So if you found an app in here that you just find you don't use anymore, you can go ahead and click on it. And there should be an option for uninstall. It'll give you a little warning here. We can go ahead and click uninstall. And there may be some additional steps depending on the actual app, but you'll see that one removed quick and easy. So if you're ever looking to remove an app to perhaps increase a little storage space on your computer or something, you can remove your apps from there. And again, we're going to use this home section to go back to the home section. And we're going to jump over to accounts now. And there's one area you might be interested in your accounts, and that's over here to the left on sign-in options. So we use a password by default to log in on this computer, but you can see there's different options that you may or may not have available to you. But like for example, if you have a laptop, you may have a fingerprint scanner option. So depending on how you want to log into your device, you can set it here. And again, let's go back home. And the next section we're jumping into is time. The time section's pretty simple, but if you ever find your clock is wrong, you can go ahead and go into here and then sync it with the internet. And it's asking me for the administrator password. You may already be logged in as administrator. And then that'll sync your clock to the internet time, which should be accurate. If you find that your clock is accurate other than the hours are wrong, you may have the wrong time zone set, in which case you can use this drop down to select your current time zone. For us, it's Eastern time. And I always leave the adjust for daylight savings time automatically turned on. And we're going to go back home again and check out one last section that you might be interested in, and that's updates and security. And this section here will let you look at the updates your computer has available for it. Now by default, Windows is pretty good about updating on its own, so you shouldn't have to go to this section too often. But if you want, you can go in here and there'll be a button. In this case, it says restart. Oftentimes the button will just say check for updates. It looks like it happened to have installed some updates while we were doing this, so this would just allow me to restart it and finish those updates. But this is where you'd go to check manually if you have any updates available for your computer. And I'm going to go ahead and close out. Those are all the basic settings that you'd probably ever want to look at on a day-to-day basis. But if you ever want to look at other things, again, you can go to your Start menu, your Settings, and as you saw, they're all laid out categorically, so if you want to play around with other settings, feel free to. You can't really hurt anything too much. If you change a setting and don't like it, you can always change it back. And that concludes this video on using these settings in Windows 10. If you liked this video, consider giving it a thumbs up or subscribing to be notified for future content. Thank you, and have a great day.